We spend our lives building a world that feels like it belongs to us. It's not just about our possessions, our house, clothes, or money. We also cling to our memories, thoughts, relationships, and even our identity, believing they define who we are. This deep attachment makes us feel like we own these aspects of our existence. But what if this belief is fundamentally flawed? What if nothing, not even the person you believe yourself to be, can truly be possessed? Consider your own body. You didn't choose its shape, height, or the way it ages. No matter how much effort you put into caring for it, it changes beyond your control. If this body truly belonged to you, wouldn't it obey your desires? Why can't you command it to stay strong, healthy, and young forever? We often equate ownership with control. Yet, the more we try to control our bodies, thoughts, or even our relationships, the more we realize how fragile and fleeting they are. Our health fluctuates, emotions change, and people come and go. Even our thoughts are not entirely ours. They arise and fade away like passing clouds. The Buddha taught that clinging to things, whether material or mental, leads to suffering. The more we grasp at permanence in an impermanent world, the more pain we invite into our lives. Accepting that nothing can be truly owned doesn't mean we abandon everything. Instead, it invites us to experience life with openness and humility, acknowledging that everything is borrowed, temporary, and ever-changing. Understanding this can be liberating. It allows us to appreciate life as it is, without the pressure to control or cling. It encourages us to care for our bodies, relationships, and experiences without mistakenly believing they are ours to possess. The question is, can you release your grip, even a little, and allow life to simply be? The truth is, no part of life is truly ours. Not even our thoughts. They arise and vanish on their own, like clouds drifting across the sky. Have you ever tried to sit quietly and simply observe your mind? Thoughts appear without warning, darting from one idea to another. Some are pleasant, some are troubling, and others are utterly random. Yet none of them wait for your permission to arrive. If your own mind behaves this way, how much control do you really have? Despite this truth, we continue to cling. The mind latches onto things, people, objects, achievements, and even beliefs, as if holding tightly will keep them safe and permanent. But the more we grip, the more fragile everything seems to become. Our desire to control and possess is deeply ingrained. We try to own relationships, hoping to ensure loyalty and affection. But relationships strained by control often grow brittle and break under the pressure. We cling to our achievements, desperate to preserve their significance, only to find their meaning fading with time. Even simple, mundane objects, a watch, a phone, a notebook, can stir anxiety if we believe they define who we are. Why do we cling so desperately to things that are bound to change? Part of it is biological. Clinging isn't just a habit. It's wired into our brain. Studies show that when we feel ownership over something, the brain releases dopamine, a chemical that produces pleasure and a sense of security. It's the same chemical released when we achieve something or feel valued. This neurological reward system explains why we become attached so easily, even to things with little or no true value. Losing a cheap pen you've carried for weeks can feel oddly frustrating. It's not the pen itself that matters. It's the mind's desperate attempt to hold on, to assert control over something, anything, in an unpredictable world. This tendency to cling is universal, transcending culture, status, and age. Consider the story of a powerful king who once proclaimed that his vast kingdom was his alone. In response, a wise teacher bent down, picked up a single grain of sand, and asked, "Can you take even this with you when you die?" The king had no answer. That tiny grain of sand shattered his illusion. No matter how much we claim to possess, nothing truly belongs to us. Despite such wisdom, the mind resists acceptance. It continues to grasp, convinced that by holding tighter, we will gain control, security, or happiness. But this grasping only makes us anxious, restless, and fearful. We cling to ideas about ourselves, identities, achievements, and roles, believing they form a solid foundation of who we are. But these too are fleeting. The mind is like a monkey reaching into a jar filled with nuts. The monkey grabs a handful, but its clenched fist becomes too large to pull back out. Trapped, the monkey panics, not because the jar is locked, but because it refuses to let go. Our minds behave the same way. We cling to things, believing that letting go would mean losing something vital. But this grasping is precisely what keeps us stuck. We become trapped in cycles of anxiety and dissatisfaction, convinced that peace lies just beyond our grasp. But the more we chase, the more elusive it becomes. The very act of holding on is what causes suffering. We often mistake attachment for love, and clinging for security. We believe that if we stop holding on, we will lose everything. But the opposite is true. Letting go does not mean abandoning or neglecting what we value. Instead, it means recognizing the impermanence of all things and accepting them as they are, without trying to control or possess them. True freedom arises not from gaining control, but from releasing the illusion of control. By acknowledging that nothing can be truly owned, we create space for peace, compassion, and genuine appreciation. Relationships flourish when freed from possessiveness. Achievements feel more fulfilling when enjoyed without the fear of losing them. Even ordinary objects become beautiful when we appreciate them for what they are, rather than what they represent to us. Understanding this doesn't mean we give up on life. It doesn't mean we reject relationships, ambition, or joy. Rather, it encourages us to engage with life more fully, with a sense of openness and humility. We learn to care for what we have without clinging to it, knowing that everything is temporary. Buddhist teachings often emphasize the concept of non-attachment, not as a form of detachment or indifference, but as a way of relating to life with clarity and compassion. When we release the need to possess, we allow ourselves to experience life as it is, rich, complex, and constantly changing. Instead of trying to control the world around us, we can learn to flow with it. Like a river that moves effortlessly around stones, we can navigate life's challenges with grace when we are not bound by the need to own or control. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting that life will continue to unfold, whether or not we cling to it. It means appreciating what we have while we have it, and releasing it when it is time to move on. Perhaps the greatest paradox is that by letting go, we gain everything. When we release our grip, we find freedom in simply being. We discover that the peace we sought through control was always available, hidden beneath the layers of our own resistance. So ask yourself, what are you holding on to so tightly? What fears or desires are keeping you trapped? What would happen if you allowed yourself to simply let go? True liberation lies not in gaining more, but in releasing what no longer serves us. When we learn to let go, we find that life itself becomes our greatest teacher. The harder we cling, the more we suffer. This is the root of our unease. We spend our lives desperately trying to hold on to things that are already slipping through our fingers. Nothing in this world can be fully owned or preserved, not permanently and not perfectly. The more we try to claim what isn't ours to keep, the more anxious and dissatisfied we become. This constant grasping, this relentless struggle for control, is what creates our suffering. True peace doesn't come from clinging tighter. It comes from seeing the world through a different lens, one that understands and accepts the nature of change. The price of holding on. Ownership feels like security. When we think we possess something, it offers a sense of stability, comfort, and control. But beneath that illusion of comfort lies something far more troubling: fear. The more we believe we own something, the more terrified we become of losing it. Consider someone who treasures an expensive watch. At first, they feel proud and satisfied, perhaps even joyful. But soon, that pride turns into anxiety. They constantly check their wrist, panic if they can't find the watch for a moment, and worry about scratches or damage. What once brought them happiness now feels like a burden, a quiet but persistent fear of loss. This fear isn't just emotional. It's physical. Neuroscience has shown that losing something we care about activates the same regions of the brain as physical pain. That's why even the loss of something seemingly insignificant can feel surprisingly distressing. But the mind doesn't just see objects. It sees extensions of itself. When we believe we own something, we often feel that it reflects our identity. The more attached we are, the more it becomes a part of how we define ourselves. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "You may control your thoughts and actions, but everything else, your possessions, your reputation, even your body, lies beyond your grasp." His words echo the Buddha's teachings. Our suffering intensifies when we cling to what we cannot truly control. The trap of possessiveness in relationships. Our tendency to cling doesn't just affect our relationship with material things. It poisons our relationships with people, too. Imagine a parent who holds too tightly to their child, constantly trying to control their choices out of fear for their safety. Though their intention is loving, the result is stifling. The child feels trapped, their independence stunted. Love, when twisted by possessiveness, becomes suffocation. Or consider a partner who clings possessively in a relationship, demanding constant reassurance and control. They may insist on knowing where their partner is at all times or feel threatened by their partner's independence. Though their intentions may stem from love or a desire for closeness, the result is resentment, distance, and pain. The tighter we cling, the more we push others away. Relationships become strained, and love becomes conditional. Instead of fostering connection, our attachment breeds insecurity and conflict. Fear of losing identity. Clinging doesn't just harm our relationships, it limits our personal growth. Imagine someone who achieved success in their career and now defines themselves entirely by that achievement. They fear change, avoid risk, and cling to their past identity because it feels safe. They resist new opportunities because they're afraid of failure, or worse, of no longer being seen as successful. But by holding on to who they once were, they prevent themselves from evolving into who they could be. Growth requires movement, flexibility, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. Clinging, however, demands rigidity. It insists that we stay within the narrow confines of what feels familiar and secure. The illusion of control. What makes letting go so difficult is our deep-rooted belief in control. We imagine that by holding tightly, whether to objects, relationships, or identities, we can protect ourselves from pain or loss. But this belief is built on illusion. No matter how much we try to control life, it will continue to change. Relationships evolve, possessions break or are lost, and even our bodies age and transform. Nothing remains fixed. We cling because we want certainty. But life is inherently uncertain. The more we try to impose control, the more suffering we create for ourselves. It's like trying to capture water in a clenched fist. The tighter you squeeze, the less you can hold. Finding peace through release. If grasping and clinging cause suffering, then the way to peace lies in letting go. But letting go doesn't mean abandoning everything or detaching from life. It means approaching the world with a sense of openness, acceptance, and humility. To release our clinging, we must first understand it. What are we trying so desperately to hold on to? Why do we believe it is necessary for our happiness or security? Often, when we look closely, we see that our attachments are built on fear, insecurity, or mistaken beliefs about control. The practice of letting go involves accepting things as they are, not as we wish them to be. It means recognizing that our attempts to control are often futile and that peace comes not from clinging, but from allowing ourselves to flow with life's natural rhythms. This doesn't mean giving up on our relationships, ambitions, or values. It means engaging with them without the weight of attachment. We can love without trying to possess, achieve without basing our worth on success, and enjoy life's beauty without demanding that it never change. When we let go, we discover that what remains is not emptiness, but freedom. A freedom to experience life as it is, not as we want it to be. A freedom to love and grow without the constant fear of loss. Letting go is not a single act but an ongoing practice. It requires patience, awareness, and compassion toward ourselves. But with each moment of release, we move closer to a deeper, more lasting peace. The irony is that by letting go, we gain something far more valuable than the objects, relationships, or identities we tried so hard to possess. We gain the freedom to be fully present, fully alive, and fully at peace. When we cling to our past achievements or rigid ideas of who we are, we build invisible walls that limit our growth. Imagine someone who once excelled at a particular skill or career and now defines themselves entirely by that success. They shy away from new challenges, not because of a lack of ability, but because they are terrified of losing the identity they've built around that accomplishment. Or consider someone who sees themselves as strong and refuses to admit vulnerability, even when they're struggling. By clinging to a fixed idea of themselves, they construct a mental fortress that ends up becoming a prison. Rather than providing protection, it prevents them from connecting with others and from acknowledging their own need for help or healing. Why do we cling like this? At the deepest level, it's because we believe that holding on will keep us safe. We convince ourselves that if we can just control enough, our relationships, our status, even our thoughts, then we can somehow prevent loss, change, or uncertainty. But this belief is an illusion. The harder we cling, the more fragile we become. When we base our security on things that can slip through our fingers, anxiety becomes inevitable. The mind stays restless, constantly scanning for threats and always afraid of losing what it's desperately trying to hold. The exhaustion of clinging. Carrying this fear is like holding a heavy bag for hours. At first, you convince yourself that you need to carry it, that without it, you won't be safe or whole. But the longer you grip it, the more exhausted you become. Every muscle aches under the strain, and your mind grows foggy from the constant tension. When you finally set that heavy bag down, the relief is immediate. Your arms feel light, your body relaxes, and your mind clears. That's what letting go feels like. Not loss, but release. It's not about giving up what you care about. It's about loosening your grip and allowing yourself to experience life without the crushing weight of control. The Buddha never taught that we should reject the world or avoid meaningful connections. Instead, he showed us that peace comes from loosening our grip, from caring deeply without trying to possess or control. Letting go means opening our hands, releasing the tension, and discovering a different kind of freedom. The freedom of letting go. We don't have to cling to life to love it. In fact, the less we try to own, the more fully we can embrace what's right in front of us, with open hands and an open heart. Letting go doesn't mean detachment in a cold or indifferent sense. It means appreciating life deeply, without the desperation of trying to control every aspect of it. Imagine walking through a dense forest, carrying a backpack filled with stones. Each stone represents something you hold tightly. Your possessions, your achievements, your relationships, even your rigid ideas of who you are. At first, the weight feels manageable. But as the path grows steeper, every step becomes harder. Your shoulders ache, your breath falters, and the world around you seems distant and dull. Finally, exhausted, you stop and set the backpack down. The moment you let go, your body feels weightless, and for the first time in hours, you notice the cool breeze, the scent of the trees, and the warmth of sunlight on your skin. The burden wasn't just the stones, it was the belief that you had to carry them. The illusion of ownership. Buddhism teaches that clinging burdens us in much the same way. We cling to possessions, status, relationships, and even our own identity, believing these things define who we are. Yet the more tightly we hold on, the more we suffer. This clinging leads to frustration, anxiety, and a sense of incompleteness. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre noted how easily we build our identities around what we own. We act as if our stuff is part of who we are, as if it holds the key to our worth and happiness. But this creates a fragile sense of self. When we lose our possessions or achievements, it can feel as though we've lost a piece of ourselves. We don't just cling to material things, though. We cling to identities and labels, defining ourselves by rigid concepts like successful, strong, or intelligent. When something challenges those labels, when we fail, feel vulnerable, or make mistakes, our entire sense of self is threatened. The Buddha offered a powerful alternative: to see that no possession, no achievement, and no fixed idea of me can truly define who we are. The self we cling to is not solid or unchanging. It is fluid, ever-evolving, and far deeper than any single label or accomplishment. Why letting go brings peace. Letting go doesn't mean abandoning what we love or giving up on our dreams. It means engaging with life fully and wholeheartedly, without the desperate need to control it. When we stop clinging, we stop fighting against the natural flow of life. We stop resisting change and allow ourselves to adapt, grow, and transform. Instead of trying to hold on to fleeting moments or force situations to fit our desires, we learn to appreciate life as it is. Ironically, letting go often allows us to experience deeper joy and fulfillment. When we are not constantly worried about losing what we have or being someone we're not, we can approach life with curiosity, openness, and gratitude. Letting go is not a single act but an ongoing practice. It requires mindfulness, patience, and compassion toward ourselves. It involves recognizing our attachments and understanding why we cling, so that we can gradually release our grip. A different kind of freedom. When we finally set down the burdens we've been carrying, we discover a freedom that is deeper and more lasting than anything we could ever possess. This freedom is not about escaping the world or rejecting it. It's about being fully present, fully alive, and fully at peace. To let go is to recognize that life itself is a gift, not something to be controlled or owned. We can cherish the people and experiences we encounter without trying to cling to them. We can engage with our dreams and goals without attaching our entire identity to their success or failure. The less we try to grasp, the more life flows naturally and effortlessly. When we release our need for control, we find that what remains is a spaciousness of mind, a lightness of heart, and a profound sense of peace. Ultimately, letting go allows us to live more authentically. We no longer have to hide behind labels or cling to outdated identities. Instead, we can embrace our own evolving nature, trusting that true strength comes not from control, but from acceptance. When we let go, we don't lose ourselves. We find ourselves. And what we discover is a freedom that nothing in the world can take away. The concept of non-self teaches us that our identity is not something we can truly own or protect. It's a freeing realization, but one that can feel unsettling when we cling to things as if they define who we are. Consider the story of a wealthy merchant who visited the Buddha, tormented by anxiety. He feared thieves would steal his treasures and confessed, "I can't sleep. I can't enjoy what I have because I'm always afraid of losing it." The Buddha replied, "Then give away what you cannot keep." The merchant misunderstood, thinking the Buddha was advising him to give away his wealth. But the Buddha's teaching was deeper. Release the mental burden of believing that possessions define you. Whether or not the merchant parted with his wealth was secondary. The true lesson was about loosening his grip on the idea that his treasures were a part of himself. Letting go without losing connection. Letting go doesn't mean rejecting life or becoming indifferent. In fact, it often deepens our connections. A parent who clings tightly to their child, demanding control and obedience, can suffocate the relationship. But a parent who loves without trying to possess allows their child the space to grow. In that freedom, a more genuine, deeper bond forms. The same principle applies to friendships, careers, and even our own identity. Love flourishes when it's not weighed down by fear. Growth happens when we release the need to defend a rigid image of ourselves. How clinging causes mental struggle. Much of our mental suffering comes from clinging. Anxiety often thrives on attachment, when the mind fixates on imagined outcomes and constantly rehearses what might go wrong. Restlessness, too, arises from the mind's refusal to accept the present moment. It's always reaching for something more, something better, something safer. When we let go, we aren't rejecting our thoughts or feelings. We're simply releasing the need to control them. Like a clenched fist slowly opening, the mind softens, and peace naturally follows. Nature's lesson in letting go. Perhaps the most powerful reminder of this truth is found in nature. A bird carries nothing, yet it moves freely across the sky. It builds a nest but never clings to it. When the season changes, it leaves without regret. This lightness isn't indifference. It's wisdom. It reflects a deep trust that life can unfold without being grasped or controlled. The bird's freedom comes from its willingness to flow with life, rather than against it. living without the weight of fear. Our lives become lighter when we loosen our grip. Letting go doesn't mean living without love, purpose, or passion. It means living without the constant fear of losing what was never truly ours to control. When we stop clinging, we find something far greater than ownership. We find peace. And in that peace, life becomes richer, deeper, and more authentic. The final truth: nothing ever truly belongs to you. We spend our lives gathering possessions, relationships, and identities, weaving them into a fabric we believe defines who we are. Yet, no matter how tightly we cling, everything eventually slips away. Loved ones depart, bodies age, fortunes shift. This reality might seem bleak at first, but the Buddha saw it differently. It wasn't a cause for despair or fear. It was the key to lasting peace. If we cannot keep something forever, can we truly claim it as ours? Consider someone renting a house. They may decorate it, furnish it, and grow deeply attached to its walls and windows. Yet, beneath that attachment, they understand they will leave one day. No matter how much they love the house, it was never truly theirs. Life unfolds in the same way. Everything we cling to is borrowed: our wealth, titles, relationships, even our own bodies. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "When one sees with wisdom that all conditioned things are impermanent, one turns away from suffering." Understanding the impermanent nature of life doesn't mean rejecting everything we care about. Instead, it means seeing things as they truly are: temporary, fleeting, and never truly ours to own. This insight isn't meant to leave us feeling empty-handed. Rather, it leads us toward a deeper kind of wealth, the freedom that comes when we stop grasping. Learning to let go through generosity. The Buddha often encouraged the practice of generosity, dana, as a powerful tool to weaken attachment. Acts of giving, whether it's money, time, attention, or kindness, challenge the mind's habit of clinging. Each time we give something away, we gently loosen the grip we have on the world. Generosity doesn't mean we must abandon everything we own. Instead, it teaches us to hold things lightly, with an open hand instead of a clenched fist. This shift in mindset helps us release the fear of loss and opens us to a deeper, more fulfilling way of living. But letting go isn't just about physical possessions. It's also about releasing the belief that our thoughts, emotions, and identities define us. The illusion of self. Phrases like "I am this way" or "things must be like this" are bars of a self-made cage. The Buddha taught that our sense of identity is just another illusion of ownership, a mental structure built to feel secure. Yet, just like our possessions, our identity is constantly shifting. The thoughts you had 5 years ago are not the same thoughts you have now. Your beliefs, desires, and even your personality continue to evolve. Clinging to a fixed idea of yourself only creates suffering because it denies the natural flow of change. Recognizing the impermanence of identity can be deeply liberating. It allows us to approach life with curiosity rather than fear. When we stop trying to fit ourselves into rigid definitions, we become free to explore, grow, and experience life fully. Finding peace beyond ownership. Letting go doesn't mean living without love or purpose. It means living without the constant anxiety of losing what we believe belongs to us. When we loosen our grip, we find something far greater than ownership. We find peace. Instead of trying to secure happiness through possessions or status, we discover it in a simpler, more profound way. By embracing life as it is, without trying to hold it down. True freedom comes from understanding that nothing ever truly belonged to us in the first place. And in that realization, we find a joy that cannot be lost. The person you believed yourself to be as a child is not the person you are today. Over time, your thoughts, emotions, desires, and even your sense of identity have changed. When we recognize this truth, the mind begins to soften. It no longer feels compelled to defend a fixed, unchanging identity. Instead, we become adaptable, open, and free to respond to life as it unfolds. The Buddha encouraged contemplation of impermanence, anicca, as a practice for loosening the mind's grip on the illusion of ownership. This doesn't mean dwelling on loss or clinging to a sense of despair. Rather, it's about observing change as it naturally occurs. Simply watching the breath offers a powerful lesson. Every inhale rises and falls, never staying the same. Thoughts, too, follow this pattern, appearing, lingering for a brief moment, and then fading away. Even our most intense emotions, whether joy or anger, inevitably pass. By observing this constant movement, we gradually realize that nothing, not even the concept of me, is truly solid or permanent. The more clearly we see this truth, the less we cling. We begin to understand that trying to grasp and control the ever-changing flow of life only leads to suffering. Practicing letting go. For those who wish to experience this insight directly, there's a simple but powerful practice worth trying. For one day, silently repeat the phrase, "This does not belong to me." When you pick up your phone, remind yourself, "This does not belong to me." When you speak to a loved one, say quietly in your mind, "This does not belong to me." When anger, joy, or fear arises, observe it and whisper again, "This does not belong to me." This is not an exercise in detachment or coldness. Instead, it's a way of gently loosening the mind's grip, a compassionate reminder that everything we experience is passing through our hands like water. Nothing is truly ours to keep, and recognizing this can bring profound peace. At first, this practice may feel uncomfortable or unsettling. The mind might resist, clinging even harder to the things it feels define its existence. But if you persist, something remarkable begins to happen. A sense of lightness gradually emerges. Fear softens, anxiety loosens, and the mind discovers a space of calm it never knew was possible. By acknowledging the impermanence of all things, you start to relate to life with greater ease and kindness. The gentle release of clinging. This process is not about rejecting life or avoiding meaningful connections. It's about approaching life with openness rather than control. By understanding that nothing truly belongs to us, we free ourselves from the constant anxiety of trying to secure what is always slipping away. The Buddha never promised that this freedom could be found overnight. It requires patience, effort, and a willingness to look honestly at the nature of existence. Yet, each moment of awareness, each time we remember that nothing truly belongs to us, is a step toward peace. Generosity, dana, is one of the most effective practices for weakening attachment. Acts of giving, whether it's material possessions, time, kindness, or attention, train the mind to release its habit of clinging. Every time we give something away, we challenge the belief that holding on will bring happiness. Generosity doesn't mean abandoning everything you have. Instead, it means learning to hold things lightly. When we give without expecting anything in return, we open ourselves to a deeper sense of joy and freedom. The clenched fist of attachment gradually relaxes, allowing the natural flow of life to continue unimpeded. Seeing things as they are. Perhaps the most profound realization comes when we understand that even our sense of self is not something we can own or control. Phrases like, "I am this way," or "things must be like this," are like bars of a self-made cage. The Buddha taught that this rigid sense of identity is just another illusion of ownership, a mental structure we cling to for a false sense of security. But just like our possessions, our identity is constantly shifting. The thoughts you had a decade ago are not the thoughts you have now. Your beliefs, desires, and even your personality continue to evolve. Trying to cling to a fixed idea of yourself only creates suffering because it resists the natural flow of change. When you let go of the illusion that your identity is something solid and unchanging, you become free to grow, adapt, and explore life with a sense of curiosity rather than fear. The gift of letting go. Ultimately, this journey is not about loss but discovery. By releasing the illusion of ownership, we uncover something far greater than any material possession or fixed identity. Letting go doesn't mean giving up on life or withdrawing from what you care about. Instead, it means fully embracing each moment without the desperate need to control or possess it. The truth is, nothing ever truly belonged to us. Not our wealth, our relationships, or even our own bodies. But in releasing our grip, we find something far more precious, a peace that no one can take away. Letting go is not about giving up. It's about finally seeing things as they are. And in that clarity, we discover a freedom beyond all fear. If you found peace and inspiration in these teachings, make sure to subscribe to Daily Buddhism Wisdom, where we explore timeless wisdom to help you live with compassion, clarity, and calm. Hit the subscribe button and join our community on the path to inner peace.